Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Virtual Office Hours. We are still in the midst of our fall 2016 series where we are talking about the course that we're teaching this semester on the American Revolution. As always, Abby Blakeney, our producer, is here. I have the Founding Fathers with me as well. We are coming to the end of the semester, this one, and then one more episode next week, and we will have finished this series. This week, we spent a little time talking about the relationship between the American Revolution and religion. Now, many of you know that that's a sort of topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I've done some work on that. And we read a really interesting document from a group of Jews who petitioned the Pennsylvania Assembly for their religious freedom, or at least their civil rights. A little bit of background might be necessary here. After the American Revolution, all 13 states created state constitutions, and Pennsylvania created one in 1776. Most historians describe that Pennsylvania Constitution as one of the most liberal and democratic constitutions really in Western history up until this point. There were no qualifications for office holding, no property qualifications for men. There was just one house legislature, so there was no executive branch or system of checks and balances on the people. It was very, very democratic for its day, of course. But there are also some limits to it. And within the Pennsylvania Constitution, the framers made it very clear what kind of people, at least from a religious point of view, they wanted to hold office. So in order to hold office or run for office in Pennsylvania in the in the years immediately after the American Revolution, one had to swear a test oath, or at least utter a test oath. And part of that test oath said this. I'm going to read it here for you. Again, anyone who wanted to participate in government, run for office, be a member of the General Assembly, a representative of this one house legislature, had to affirm this statement. I do acknowledge the scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration, to which is added an assurance that no further or other religious test shall ever hereafter be required of any civil officer or magistrate in this state. Now, what's interesting about this is it's clearly a religious test, right? The Assembly of Pennsylvania wants people who uphold the divine inspiration of the Old and New Testaments. Now, certainly this would qualify Christians because they believe in the inspiration of both the Old and New Testaments, but it would disqualify Jews who do not believe in the divine inspiration of the New Testament. Would exclude them from holding office. Now, just to clarify, Jews would be given religious freedom to worship without government interference, so they had a certain sense of religious liberty, but they didn't have the right to hold office. So in 1783, a group of Jews in Pennsylvania, associated with the synagogue there in Pennsylvania, write to the assembly petitioning for their civil rights. And we read their petition in class. Here I think is probably the most important part of the petition. These Jews say, but with great submission, they're referring to themselves here in the third person, but with great submission they apprehend that a clause in the Constitution which disables them to be elected by their fellow citizens to represent them in assembly is a stigma upon their nation and religion, and it is inconsonant with the second paragraph of the said Bill of Rights, meaning the Bill of Rights in the Pennsylvania Constitution. Otherwise, Jews are as fond of liberty as their religious societies can be. And then the petition goes on to talk about how Jews participated in the American Revolution. They were great supporters of liberty, and so forth. So what's fascinating is we looked at some of these state constitutions, and many of them have very, very limiting, at least by 21st century perspective, limiting understanding of who can participate in government and who cannot. And in Pennsylvania, at least in 1776, it is clear that Jews, while they do have religious liberty to worship, do not have religious liberty or the liberty to participate in office. Now, this is going to change down the road, but here is a petition, an early petition by Jews arguing for their civil rights, in this case, to hold office in Pennsylvania. So it's a very interesting part of this so-called liberal or democratic or even radical constitution, that there are certain limits, and it shows you the kind of complexity of some of these documents. So that's our lesson for today. We'll see you next time on the Virtual Office Hours.